Okay, let's talk a little bit and go over just a part of this last week's 3 assignments. We'll go from the business rule to what might be in Visio. First off, as we read down through here, when we hit this first paragraph, we really hit some of the information that can be put inside the business rule with regards to a customer and the charter flights. Now, when we look at this, we can see that a charter flight takes place only after a customer reserves. So at least one charter flight to customer. Now, when we look at our customer, we can tell that a customer has one or more destinations. They can reserve many different flights. So here we can see that a customer can have many different charters. But again, a charter only goes back to one customer. Now we can also see that I can be a customer, but I don't have to reserve any of the flights, because if I read on, it tells me that some of the customers do not use the chartering options. So we can look at it as a charter has to have a customer to exist. Okay. But as far as a customer goes, a customer may not be using a charter or may be using many. So if we look down that and just try and put them inside a rule type order, if we can get it to come up here. Here we go. A customer may request many charter trips, but each charter trip is only requested by one customer. Some customers might not request a charter trip, but every charter trip is, again, requested by at least one customer. So when we look at this and we try and chart that, let's go to our Visio now. And again, we have our crow's foot, and let's take our entity and put it out here. And again, there's a lot of different ways to work with this. I can go here, and normally you can right click on any part and you can pretty much get what you want here. So on this one, I want it to be customer. And normally when you have a primary key, a lot of times it's a numeric ID number that's assigned. So here again, I can edit the text and tell it that it's a customer. And again, however I want to say it, a number, or an ID, then that's how we can have it listed. Now remember, I can go in here and change any of these, or I can add when I start looking at it. So let's just stick with this right now, and let's look at our relationships, and we'll add our attributes later. So I have another entity here. Again, on this one, it is going to be my charter. And again, what am I going to use for my primary key? Well, I know that for the charter itself, its primary key is going to be something like charter ID or charter, trip, whatever I want to add it to. But since these two are going to have a relationship now, remember that means that I'm going to have an attribute name here, and it's going to have to match the primary key and customer number. And again, I'm going to set this as my foreign key. And I can take my keys And now I want to work at the relationship between these two. And again, how do I want these to work? I want my to line up. I want my 0 to many, because remember, at least, to go to my charter, and my 1, again, to go to my key here. Sometimes these are not the easiest to get to come out. Okay. Now, again, if I want to put information here that something like a customer reserves a charter or a customer enters a charter, make sure you select it, right click on it, and from here, again, I can edit the text. Now, that tells us a lot about this. Now, if I want to change anything about this, again, I can go into it and I can work with different connectors. I can also tell it that I need to format the shape. And it's going to come up and tell me, okay, on my line, how thick do I want it? It also, I can tell it that what's my begin arrow type. That's what I have here. It's the one you selected first. Actually, I want it to be that one. And my ending arrow type, that's where I go up and select the 1. I can also tell it the size if I want it larger so I can see it better. I can make it extra large. I can also do that to the words here if I want. But that takes us for the first rule. And there's a lot of other rules. Remember, I may have to make these a lot smaller so I can fit everything on one page. If I address all of them, okay, because we also know that a customer has to make a payment. Now again, a customer, let's go back and look again. When we look down through here, we have everything about the operations. But a customer has to make a payment and they must purchase things like fuel, services, all the service that are available. We're only going to look at the charter operations, so we're not going to worry about the other part. But we do know that a customer has to make a payment, but a customer might make many payments. However, a payment has to be made by one customer. And we can continue to read through here. We get more information on the billing and credit. But again, we're only looking at a payment. Now look, these payments can be made at any time. And a customer may pay all or part. So that tells me that for a single payment, we're not looking at everything the customer owes. But a customer can make several payments. However, a payment is made by one customer. And again, when we go and look at this information, we can go all the way through until we get to the part about payments. A customer make many payments, but some, again, depending on credit, may have not made any payments yet. Every payment is made by one customer and only one, and every payment must exist, or excuse me, a customer must exist for that payment to be made. So we can look at it as relation to the customer. We can also look at the payment in reference to a charter. So when we add our next entity on here, again, and we're looking at it, and I'll edit the text, and I'm going to say this is a payment. And again, now this has a relationship to the customer and the charter. So when we're looking at this, we have to have the primary key for the payment. So mine's running really slow today. So I'm going to have my pay ID. Remember, I've got to be referenced to a relationship with customer and charter, which means there has to be an attribute name that will go with customer. So here, again, I have to have a customer number. It's going to have to be again, mine's running slow, so I'm kind of behind on it. A foreign key. And then on the next one, I'm going to edit the text because it has to match the charter. So at some point in time, I can see if there's a relationship between the two. Is it payment to charter or charter to payment? On how we're looking at these. But these two are linked together by a foreign key. So let's go to our relationship again. Sorry about that. And we can reference it as, again, 1, 0 to many. And I can, again, click on it, resize it, and tell it how large do I want it to be. I can also control how large those are, again, by looking over here. I can check my type at the beginning, make it any one of these. Type at the end, make it any one of them. And I can also add my text to say, makes a payment. And I can continue on with all the rest of them. The key is when you're looking at and trying to dig out all the different rules. And remember, I put inside an email that if you are basing it on criteria, such as, yes, got a lot that looked on the flight size being part of the relationship and the business rule. Really, it does not require type rating unless it meets this. Well, I might have a rule in there, but it's not going to be based on the criteria of this. That might be an attribute of the type rating within an entity of a aircraft, but that does not necessarily mean that I'm going to have a rule that's based upon a criteria being met. As I said, that's probably an attribute within something like the aircraft. Maybe I could have a code in there on weight limits. So I can continue on and do each one, or we can look at what would be our finished document. And we look at our finished document. Yes, we do have an aircraft, and it does have a mode code. Now, I didn't put in the rest of the attributes. And again, attributes we can add and take away, but normally, just by reading the information, you can come pretty close to the attributes you need and then tweak it and perfect it later on. Okay, let me show the whole thing so that you can see we have a lot of entities that could have existed. It's just a matter of what were your business rules, and for each business rule you have to have an entity. So I can look at it and pretty well guess which tables I'm going to have simply because of the business rules. Then we have to start getting into the fact of what's the relationship, what's your verb, what's the rules of your relationships, and then what are your keys. You have to make sure your keys get correct, or else we won't have the ability to run our correct queries, or a sequel that we'll look at next week in our next meeting, online meeting through collaboration. I hope this helped you some. Bye.